Hey, good afternoon. Happy Thursday, and hope you are doing well and gearing up for a nice Easter weekend if you celebrate Easter. We have some inflation data to cover this week. Surprise, surprise. And our question of the week is all about the Secure Act 2.0 and what that may mean ahead here. My name is Brandon Steele. I'm a financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue. And our goal every Thursday is to bring to you the market news, the data, the trends that we're watching, and hopefully weed out a little bit of the noise. So this week is really almost entirely around inflation. I'm curious where you are feeling this inflation phenomenon the most. Like what area of your expenses do you notice that these higher costs really hitting you the most? As far as the numbers go, what we're really seeing is that food is definitely one of the primary drivers. It's kind of a consistent, ongoing increase month after month. But of course, energy and gas prices has a lot to do with this. The auto market used in new cars also kind of are a big factor into this inflation data as well, but that's actually started slowing a little bit lately. Obviously, we all spend money on different things. And so where you're feeling this inflation impact may be completely different than your neighbor. Getting back to the actual data of this goes, so the CPI, Consumer Price Index numbers came out on Tuesday, and it was 1.2% higher this month than last month. Now, that was already higher than a high expectations of 1.1%, and we saw the year over year showing 8.5%. That's a big jump. That's a big inflation number. And obviously, as the prices continue to grow, that number keeps growing along with it. So we haven't seen any signs of slowing yet. Obviously, it's possible that could happen, but I feel more likely that we will continue to see inflation. Now, that 8.5% number or the 1.2% month over month may start to slow a bit, but nonetheless, that still means inflation is running much higher, right? We also had on Wednesday, we had producer price index data came out, and big surprise, that number was also higher than expected. Expectations there were 1.1% as well, and the number came out at 1.4%. So for whatever reason, I know we talk about this every month, but inflation is certainly being underestimated in a lot of scenarios, and month after month, these data points keep coming out higher than the market kind of expects. So I imagine that will continue, but obviously we will see in the months to come here moving forward too. Today we had initial jobless claims data come out. This was not the greatest number. I don't think it's anything to be super concerned about at this point, but initial jobless claims were slightly higher than expected and higher than last week as well at 185,000. And we've seen the initial jobless claims continue to trickle down, but did see a slight blip here to the upside this week. So hopefully that's just a one-time data point here, and we'll kind of get back on track. We also saw retail sales up 0.5%. So even with higher prices, although that can factor in here a little bit, people are still consuming. That's for sure. Next week is really going to be a lot about housing data. We've got a lot of different data points coming out next week around housing, and so we'll make sure to spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, as interest rates are rising, this housing market is becoming more and more of a concern for a lot of folks. And so this week, question of the week is a really good one. It's all about the Secure Act 2.0. There was a Secure Act, an original Secure Act that was passed, I think, 2019 and went into effect 2020. Here we are 2 years later, and we now have a newer version of the Secure Act 2.0, which was passed by the House and is now on to the Senate for approval. Before I get into the details of what these changes really are, what I want to make sure is very clear is that the version that the House has passed and the version that the Senate has been discussing are pretty different. And so most likely what has been passed by the House, which is what I'll talk about here in a minute, and what may or may not get approved by the Senate could be very different. So if that is the case, of course, it'll go back to the House to reconcile as well. So that said, where we are today is obviously this is not law yet, and still has a long battle or a long uphill battle to get into that position. But The way that the House has passed the bill is basically, there's a lot more to this, but I'm going to touch on three key areas. One is contributions, two is required distributions, and three is employer matching or employer contributions to a 401k. So the first one is on your retirement contributions. Right now, for those age 50 and up, in your 401k, you actually get a extra $6,500 a year that you can contribute to your 401k plan in order to kind of, they call it catch-up contribution, in order to catch up on your retirement savings, okay? The way that it has been passed or approved by the House, and if it were to pass, it would say that those age 62 to 64 actually get an additional catch-up contribution to their 401ks to a total of $10,000 a year. So pretty big difference here. Obviously would allow for those who are closer to retirement to really make up for any lost years of contributions, and really just to get more into their retirement plans, right? The second piece of this is the required minimum distribution, or the RMD. So if you are not familiar with this, prior to the original Secure Act, when you hit age 70 and a half, you were forced to take money out of your 401ks, your pre-tax IRAs, because that money had really never been taxed, generally speaking. And so the IRS wanted to make sure there was a mechanism to make sure that there were distributions and therefore taxation on those distributions. When the Secure Act passed in 2019, it pushed that age back to 72. And now that is another factor in the Secure Act 2.0, where they want to push it back, and it's kind of a sliding scale, but push it back to age 75 by the year 2032. Okay. Now, again, this is not law yet, so don't act on this, and it's still 72 as it stands today. But on both sides of this bill, they are talking about pushing back the required minimum distribution age. The third piece to touch on is your employer contributions to your 401k. So one of the big focuses here for both sides is that what they would like to do is set up an automatic contribution. So when you start with an employer, they would set you up on an automatic 3% contribution to your 401k. Whether you asked for it or not, basically the employer would be required to automatically enroll you in a 3% contribution rate. You can stop that. It's not like you're stuck with that if you don't want to contribute, but that's where it would start. That would be the base level, right? And then you make the decision from there. They also would require an increasing contribution every year until the total contribution on your side reached 10%. So essentially, rather than them starting you at your choice as to how much and where you want to contribute, it would be started at 3% with a 1% increase in contribution until you hit 10. So you would have to, it's almost like instead of opting in, you would have to opt out, if that makes sense. All right. So one little bonus point to touch on here as well is that they are also talking about potentially requiring employers to contribute to match student loan payments with employer 401k contributions. That one probably has a little bit more of a battle or an uphill battle to climb to be approved, but that is something that was in the bill that was passed by the House. So again, these bills between the House and the Senate are very, very different. So I can say pretty confidently that what I've just shared is probably not going to be the final version of this, but some level of this may be if it's approved by the Senate as well, because a lot of these three that I touched on are in both sides of the bill in some way, shape, or form. So very likely we'll see these as priorities for this new bill if and when it does get approved. Okay. So now it is to the Senate. I believe they're voting on it sometime late April. So we will see what happens with that, what changes may be made between the House's version and what the Senate approves. And if there are changes, again, then it has to go back to the House for reconciliation. So really important stuff. I'll actually include a link in the comments here with an article we wrote on the topic. So if you want a little extra information, you can follow that to get some more detail. Thanks as always for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. And just as a heads up, the reason I brought up Easter earlier is that the markets are closed tomorrow on Friday. So just a heads up on that there will be no trading in the stock market tomorrow, Friday. Have a great weekend, a long one if you have it off, but we will see you next Thursday at 3.